Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Swiz.
And thank you for joining us for the Richmond, once was a premier team, looking at the Tigers. And Swiz, thank you for joining us. I see you've got your lovely Richmond shirt on. You're faithful. How are you today?
Mate, flying. Anytime we got to talk about the Tigers, I'm flying, mate. So this is going to be a fun podcast. Probably 3 hours. Just sit back, get some popcorn and listen to me talk about the mighty Tigers.
Well, speaking of flying, you boys will need to be on some drugs to make the top 8 this year. But before we move on our social media, SC Insider 100, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, also all the audio platforms as well, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it. And on the YouTube, please do search for us, Supercoach Insider. And that's it, Swizz, mate. Take over. Over.
Well, where would we like to begin? The surely premiership favourites this year, mate. We're going to be flying. No, let's start with the draw. We start with the draw and that. And
West Coast are favourites.
Bitch. Yeah, fucking West Coast. Just worked out we played them twice. There's 2 fucking wins. Cop that. No, well, we start off with a win every year. We play the Blue Baggers and that, and this was looking like their best chance to get us in a while. And then Walshy was like, nah, I'm going to put a stop to that. We let Richmond win that game every year. So, yeah, we know we're going to start off with a win first week. GWS, Saints, and then the Doggies, that's going to be a tough one. Crows, and then the D's, that's a tough one. Look at the fucking Eagles. Actually, this is an interesting little area. Eagles, Pies, Hawks. I think the Bombers are in there too. So, and we play Carlton again not long after that. So there's some winnable games for the Tigers if they're able to bounce back early. But, you know, we saw last year some of the guys that get aging on a little bit. So a bit like Geelong, but Geelong are a bit, more advanced than us, I think, this season. It's probably our last crack at a possible flag, but I don't think we've got the cattle anymore to do that. But I think we'll bounce back and be at least a finals contender, and we'll, do our best. And you never know, finals time, anything can happen with those experienced players. But I think as a start of the year, if there's winnable games. If the boys get going early, they might get some momentum coming into those bigger games mid-year.
Right. Now, here's a funny, controversial statement. I actually think the Blues win in your first game this year. And they're $3.36 as well.
One on that, mate.
There's $3.36. I am not even lying. Like, do you know what I mean? I thought it would be much more 50-50. I know they've had the history there, but when you have a look, right, the Richmond are $1.35. And, like, I just think, Carlton, mate, just Thursday night footy, 6:25 p.m.
2 words, Sam fucking Walsh, mate.
Yeah, well, look, it's okay. They got Chera, they got Hewitt. I'll let Hewitt run free this game, mate. Chris can bank on that one. But Paddy Cripps, I think you're just going to get muscled, mate, to be honest. Yeah, look, $3.36, even then I'm sitting there going, geez, I wouldn't mind throwing a 20 on that one. So
you go, what, mate, anybody give a charity for Ben to bloody donate that $20 too, because it's not fucking worth it putting on the board.
Hey, I only use betting agencies for usually Melbourne Cup. I'll throw a little bit down, and AFL Grand Final. Otherwise, usually I'll do the couple of bets with Chris through the year. I do have a look at odds more just to kind of see value. I used to go through all the picking ones, and I'd be like, oh, they're playing outside in Cairns when it's usually blowy. So I'd be like, wow, to kick more than 10 behinds in a game or 11 behinds in the game total. I was like, well, there's good value. Do you know what I mean? So I'm a mean person for stats and analysis, and I'll look for values. Swiz, and I tell you at 336, Blues are value. That's all I can say. I don't say they're going to, I think they might win, but they're value.
Do we know if Bonfer listens to this? Because fuck, his Blues aren't getting anywhere near me. They're getting nowhere near us, mate.
There's no point getting on the Blues to win the flag. Take $3.36 and throw everything on against Richmond. 100%.
Mate, the biggest fucking lock of round 1. Richmond are going to beat Carlton. I'll tell you that right now. So anyway, let's talk about the players, mate.
Hey, I'll tell you what, loser does a shot on air, Swiz. How about that?
Oh, that's fine, mate. I'll do one now if somebody gets me one.
Okay, well,
I've got the mojito going and that.
You might as well do a preemptive shot. That way, when Richmond lose, you can do another. Okay, let's move on. Jaden Short's the first one I want to talk about. So there's a couple of premiums that have the potential to be a top 6 in their line. Short's one that I think we're both big on, 535K, average 98.3 for the year. Now, some people are a bit thrown off. I think Chris started him and he was like, oh, he kind of cost me 97 to start the year, 92 during the middle phase. And then when Hooley went down, though, really came home strong, averaged 106 in the back end. Really impressive. So I think with Hooley now out, I think short is the way to go. I think he's underpriced. He can definitely be pushing that top 6 barrier. He's young. Swiz, what do you think? Do you reckon he has potential?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Hasn't left my side, mate. Love the guy. I didn't have him last year, and a lot of people were on him, so I know they sort of felt a little bit of a burn factor. But because they were like, "Oh, this is the year Short's going to break out and do everything and become that big premium," but we all knew why Hawley was in that team. Short was still playing a little bit second fiddle there. They've thrown Baker down and Daniel Riolli is a bit of support throughout the season, but now with Hawley out, Short is the man. I think he averaged 5 to 10 points. Was it 5 points last year? No, it was 10 points better last year when Hawley was out, and 5 points better over the last 3 years, I think, when Hawley was out. So, there's
It's
definitely
ironic
undervalue.
It's ironic you say, he was second fiddle because normally his first fiddle is a bit short too, Swizz.
Well, not sharing a bath stall with Jaden, I can't confirm or deny that, but
I share all the stalls.
Yeah, maybe you and Zorks, but Shorty is definitely a great pick. And the great thing about
I'll tell you this.
Yeah, you go on, mate.
I'll tell you this, right? Dane Zorko, it'd be like Step Brothers all over again, where it'd be like Jane Stamos, and then we'd go to the urinal, like pull out the little tape measure, and we'd be like, it's the same. Yeah, twinning for sure. And if not, I'd definitely cut it down to size just to twin out.
No, and I think a couple of those games, people got a bit scared of the Melbourne game, the 61. He had some 70s and 60s in there, but there were some reasons for that. But the guy loves to kick the ball. He's one of those 65-metre players that we talk about. And it works the other end, like a bit like Daniel Rich. You don't want to leave this guy free when somebody's marked the ball 55 out, because he loves the handball receive and kick at goal. And he does like getting a few. I've seen him do it to the Chris's Pies a few times. For some reason, they never man him up when he's, somebody's got that mark at 55. So at 535, I don't think you can go too wrong. I know, only being in 11% of teams, because a lot of people like those more expensive options, or are looking at Whitfield and Sicily. So I can understand that. But yeah, I definitely think he's valued this year.
I agree. And not only that, I think teams now are starting to get used to the standing on the mark rule a little bit more as well, as ways to exploit it. You look at Carlton, and Carlton, when they get a mark, they're kind of standing near the person on the mark, and they're looking for the offload. So Zach Williams and your Sards were really trying to run through where even Patrick Cripps, got a mark, looks around and literally facing the other way, waiting for one of these three runners to kind of run through, because the person on the mark has to stay there. So if you're running at pace, there's no way they can get you. And people like Short coming out of the defensive line, anywhere near goals, all he has to do is run past that person, and they literally draw and pass, bang, he kicks it. And I think these rebounding types with good kicking accuracy, speed, and distance on their kick, like Short has, I think it's underrated. That's why I also think for Zach Williams and Sard could be good value in draft leagues this year. But Short for me, I think is I'm definitely not going to be shorting his stock, mate. I'm all in. I've had him in my side for a lot of the year as well.
And it's the wages we set up, like Grimes, Asprey. We don't like these guys kicking the ball, so it's about them taking the intercept mark. Where's Short? Handball to Short. And it used to be handball to Hawley. And Hawley was, we know was probably unlucky not winning one of those Norm Smiths, but he did it for a number of years out of that Richmond defence, and Short's just the next guy. So, and at his age, I just think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree. Next one, Dustin Martin is a mid-forward, 503,000, average 92.5. Definitely a burn man for a lot of people last year. Started off with 97 average over first 6. He went bang. I think the first couple of rounds went big and then completely dropped off. He was battling with a little bit of injury. Then he ended up having, was it a kidney issue or something or other? So he was real ill. Dropped a whole bunch of weight, which probably does help a little bit of the running in his rehab as well, trying to get big and strong again in through the core. Now, here's the funny thing, though, is that Riewoldt did say that Dusty was set for more midfield time in 2022 after playing closer to goal over the past 3 seasons. I was like, oh, okay, that could be interesting. And then literally in the trial game, played, a whole bunch of midfield time, and it's definitely one to watch with.
Well, mate, I was absolutely loving the fact that Dusty was back there in the midfield, and there's a few reasons for that. Now, the first worry is obviously the injury and coming back from there last year, and a lot of people are worried about how that's going to affect him and thinking he might start more forward. I think it's the opposite effect because Dusty, they usually try to ease him back. He hasn't had a lot of short pre-seasons. He'd be flying back and forward to New Zealand, where this year, unfortunately, the passing of his dad, he's now probably just got footy to concentrate on. It's not flying back and forward. With the injury, it was just recovery and then straight back into footy. So there was no need for him to sort of be eased back in the season. He's just been back training. Part of my job where I'm on the train. I'm lucky enough to get to see 2 minutes of Richmond every day while I'm sitting at the platform and just watching him run. And they just seem to be doing so much running. I think he's dropped like 15 Ks now. So, yeah, instead of that sort of forward role and just kind of the guys that Richmond have got down there, we know they've had the small forwards, but Jack Riolli, Tom Lynch are still the mainstays down in that forward line. You think Cochin's probably going to have a bit more of a different role out of that midfield with Graham and Bolton taking over. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Koch playing a little bit more forward time. Lambert's the same there as another one who's, as they're aging, they'll probably spend a little bit more time off the half-forward flank. And, yeah, this could be, well, I think Richmond and Dimmer will be looking at going, this is our last chance. Who's our best player to get in that midfield? And that's Dusty. So it wouldn't surprise me if he came out and just went, haywire, especially early. And he's got a tendency to do that. The
and
other
then
reason,
rest forward even, I guess.
Yeah. The other reason, like the thing I actually really like about him, because in previous years I would never start Dusty and everybody would be on him, and he'd come out, go bang bang, and then have some slow weeks because of that, shortened pre-season that he would have. But he used to always be around that 550 to 600k mark. Now this year, and he would drop to between 450 and 500. Well, this year he is at 500. So the actual drop down isn't going to be, if he was to drop, not that much. I think it's all the other way, or at very least he's going to stay his price before he'll have a rise at some point. So I don't, and I think we talked about before, Benny, about the pre-season game where, he played all, most of the minutes on the ball, which he normally doesn't do in the preseason. So it shows that he's ready to go for round one. And it's very tempting to start him. And especially that I think it's 30%, no, 29%, 30%. So have got him in at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised if that rises if he has a big performance in the midfield against the Hawks this weekend.
Yeah, and it's one that I've been tossing up with watching just based on his price point because I can't see him going worse. It just depends now with the news that Riolli was saying, plus the visual and the stats on how he went in the trial game. It's now kind of two things lining up together. And similar to like with Geelong and Dangerfield as well, how you kind of have to play those guys in the midfield. Do you know what I mean? If you want to have your last hurrah, you need your best players in there. So it's kind of like, right, well, if you get banged up, then we can rest you later, mate. We can put you in the forward line a bit more later if we're rebuilding or whatever. But if you're going to have a shot at winning, you need your best guys in there. And I think he's dynamic. And even now you look at how teams are sort of matching up with some bigger boys, some dynamic and X-factor players. Dusty in that midfield would just be, exceptional.
And that's where it comes into with like Dangerfield and Dusty being very similar players. In the previous part, you just knew for those last for Geelong for a long time and Richmond probably over the last 4 years that they knew they were playing finals, or they did, and ticked all the boxes. They were going to be there. So some of those players they'll be trying to manage, and that's what we talked about in the Melbourne podcast. What does Melbourne do with Oliver and Gawn and Petrarca this year, because they should have the talent enough to make the finals. And it's about when they come to that time of the year, they want their boys ready to go. Richmond doesn't have the luxury this year. It's not like, oh, well, we'll just bank wins early, or we'll get those games that we know we can win. Dusty can rest forward this year. Richmond have to have their best team on the park to win those games. So, and Dusty's their best player.
Yep. Can't disagree more. I think it's definitely going to be the case. This year, I think, is the year to probably get on him then, because next year he'll probably go back to a midfielder and maybe average you 100 to 105 and be like, okay, like he's a good midfielder. But, you're not going to be putting him in standards. So for those kind of players, same as your Heenies and your Butters, they'll probably be a midfielder only next year. And we see time and time again, players that are playing midfield role, they are the ones to get onto, particularly when they have that year. Your Greenwoods, your Brayshaws and stuff in previous years. Marshall, who was a ruck, he changed obviously straight out to a ruck. Dangerfield was a forward only, was doing really well, then moved to a midfield. Dusty previously forward, but changed into a midfield. So you can look at these people with a midfield role and a forward status. It's the best thing you can do because it's easier. They have low, better floor, better ceiling, more consistency, and generally average better. So that's why I'm kind of looking at this person in particular. And at 30% owned, he does have an ability to burn you as well if you don't get on him. So I am now heavily looking at him, which is at the point now I'm trying to work out how to get him in my side Swiz. We just had a bit of a muck around before. Somehow I've ticked all the boxes and I'm looking going, hang on, how do I have 13 premiums? Yeah, it's a funny game, this business.
And zero cash, exactly, Benny. That's a fair effort there, mate.
Zero cash, which is definitely one that we don't normally get to speak about. Hey, Swizzy, but
Cash, no cash here, mate.
no cash here. Chopper, good old Chopper. Speaking of which, mate, you can start talking about a bit of draft leagues now. Hey, is that the only two more relevance there? While you do that,
mate,
I'll bring up the no cash team just for people to have a little squeeze out on the YouTube.
Yeah, that's worth having a look at. But, mate, there's probably, another 20 relevant players that we need to talk to about the people. I think the first one is actually Jack Graham. That's another one we talk about, as you said before, with the Zorko's Dangerfields. Those guys have forward status and butters, and then they lose it because they play all midfield time. Jack Graham, I think this will be the last year he'll be midfield forward. Now, he's not going to be a standard option, but in draft at 457, he is falling. A lot of people aren't looking at him because he didn't have the greatest average last year, around that sort of 85 mark, playing pure midfield. Now, I think he's that sort of inside ball, and we know Presti has had a lot of injury problems over the last few years, so I can't see Graham dropping under that. I think there's some value there, at least 5 points. I don't think he's going to be that 105 guy like, your Cheras and Hewitts who go play full-time midfield, but I still think, 95 is a fair reflection of what he could do. And, so there's some good value there as a draft option.
Yeah, no, I don't mind Graham. And when he plays midfield, he usually goes 90 to 100 anyway, so don't mind that at all
And
in
he likes
those
the
leagues.
tackle as well, so that's always important. We've said about that, the new tackling rules. Shy Bolton, your thoughts on here, mate? I should leave Bolton to you, mate.
Oh, don't even. Look, he's very talented. But, you kind of, Aaron Hall was one that was doing really well and trending well, and I decided that, buck the trend because of his history. And then Shy Bolton was having a similar trend of, good games, except for like one or two. And I think I was okay, I'll jump on him, and obviously made the wrong decision. So I don't know. Shy Bolton, another year under his belt, maybe he'll get more consistent. He's definitely got that X factor and that dynamic sort of play. So I do like him, even in like keeper leagues or even in draft leagues. I don't mind him because the forward line does drop off pretty quick. So I think there is some value there or some upside if you're kind of looking at natural progression, natural upside, maybe more consistency. Will it happen? I don't know, but at least it's, not as bleak as other players. At least he has some upside.
Yep. Presti is another one with some value in the midfield, and a lot of these Richmond players have value because they had a lot of injuries last year. We copped injuries at the wrong time and lost some games that we shouldn't. And Presti is one that does miss a lot of games, so you have to be aware of that. So you don't want to take him too early. But I do see him sitting around quite later in a few drafts at the moment because of that and just his average. And he had that 13 against Sid, that injury affected 13. But yeah, here's a guy that when he came back at the end of the year off no, really much training, he pumped out a 113 and a 120. So he can still score. Richmond still, that's his only position he plays as midfield. You're not going to see him lining up in the forward pocket or the halfback flank. So definitely some value there in draft.
I like it. I think that's pretty much what Nankervis, Baker, Lynch
Baker's
looked
not,
all right, but did
Baker's
himself
not a
in.
bad one because I think he's now the next, he's playing Short's role and now
Yeah.
Short's moved to Hawley. So, he's going to be playing off the half back. I think Richmond's backline's pretty settled. Bolton, they're talking about Bolter possibly playing some forward, but Bolter, Asprey, Grimes, Broad, Short, and then you've got Baker back there, and then there's a possibility of that one more, depending on what they're going to do with Bolter.
When Short's average started to spike in that last sort of 6-7 rounds, I think Baker averaged about 88.3 in that period. So it's there could be some upside to go high 80s, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like a bit, as we said, it's not going to be as good as Short was playing with Hawley, but for a guy that you're going to get really late in drafts as a defender, Definitely just keep an eye on him because you could have him as your last on-field defender, and he could score 80s for you. So it's not a bad little sneaky pick for that one. Daniel Riolli's come up a name a few times, and that just because of the role change. I think this is Daniel's last possible year on the list if he was to have another kind of shocker. He's been one of the whipping boys at Richmond. I've got a bit of a soft spot for him, but up forward, it's always hard as a small forward, so they've tried to give him that role down in the back line, and there's a bit of talk about, as I said, moving Bolton back up to the forward line to give some support there. Maybe get Gibkas in some games, or with those already tall players, Broad, Asprey, and Grimes, and then play the extra small down there. So Riolli as a swing, I think he's a defender forward, a mid forward.
Yeah.
No, it's Morris. Daniel is the forward defender.
Yeah.
He's not a bad one to put on your bench in a draft. And it gives you a bit of flexibility there. And if he plays defence, 75 as a bench defender, fantastic.
Yeah, his last 7 rounds for 79.4, so he could push towards the 80. Just depends, I guess, on consistency and role. What else are you looking at? What do you think about Ralph Smith? Everyone's kind of jumping on him.
And that's where I brought up Riolli first, because it's the eye test this week, because it's talked about Ralph Smith actually playing Riolli's role down there. So
right.
he becomes a standard option if they go Ralph Smith over Riolli, because we just said that Riolli in those weeks went 79. And if Ralph, we all know the guy's playing off that half back line and just with all the freedom in the world, it's like the rucks. Every ruck on the field scores 80. Pretty well every half back scores 80, and that it's the quarterback role. Short's going to be the man. But if they look at Ralph Smith being in, and there's a lot of talk about him possibly, he's gone ahead of Sydney Stack, because unfortunately, as much talent as Stack has, he's a bit of a loose cannon off the field. So I think they're looking at young Ralph Smith as a possibility of getting some game time. So big eye test for Richmond's backline this week as an option.
Interesting. Now, I want to touch on this more just for comical reasons. Thompson Dow is priced just a couple of $1,000 shorter than Paddy Dow was last year. Now, do you reckon that 40 to 50% of the comp should jump on this year, Swiz?
Well, for shits and giggles, why not? Yeah, why not? He's probably better than, I can't say he's better than his brother, because they kind of play a bit different, but he's more on the wingman. But I will say with this for Richmond, we did lose some of those sort of guys over the last few years. Brandon Ellis, Markov went up to the Suns. We lost Jackie Higgins and Butler, who were more the small forwards, but Higgins was looked at that guy that might push more midfield time. So Richmond, outside of McIntosh, I think Conker before that, we've lost a lot of those half-forward wingmen over the years. So McIntosh is more the defensive winger, and we're looking for that more attacking winger on the other side. So Thompson Down could be the guy. That I've heard he's been training quite well. So again, the eye test would be interesting, because a bit like Liam Henry at Fremantle, that high draft pick that they're trying to, get him up around the ball. Thompson Dow, I don't really like it as much for standard, but again, if for a draft smoky, especially like if you can pick somebody up for your bench who, they get around the ball, score average 75, and he's a forward, fantastic, because there's a few forwards who, are priced at that sort of 400,000 mark that you're looking at going, God, I don't even think they can go 75 this year. So,
the audacity to mock my smoky draft relevance on players that might get 80. Then you start pumping up Dow's tyres. Thompson Dow's tyres as a 75 draft option. How dare you?
Well, mate, we don't have a wingman. We don't actually have a fucking wingman there. And that you tell me who's going to play wing for Richmond.
Okay, so say if he's on the wing, then he could go 80 plus and therefore be a bench option on your draft.
Yeah, it could be.
Basically, it'll be a waiver watch. You kind of look at him and go, sweet, no worries. And the reason why we watched the last preseason game too is because that's where you can pick up some role changes in your draft waiver wire or free agency, usually free agency if you've done your drafts already. Happened a couple of years ago. I was watching the game. I was like, wow, Clayton Oliver looks pretty good. And then I was like, I'll watch him in the second game. This is when they played a few. And I was out at the time, and I think I just happened to catch a glimpse. And I think at halftime I saw how well Oliver was going. I was like, right, I need to move on Oliver. And I had a look, and Chris got him at quarter time. And Clayton Oliver went on to average like 110 or something or other for that year? Like, it's just one of those things where you look at role, and basically when you look at them, and if it looks like the role's there and they have the performance, then maybe if you find some space. And it could be just like I'm trying to think of the Adelaide kid. Beefcakes. Schoenberg
Mm-hmm.
could be him this year if he's
Yeah,
playing
it could
pure
be.
mid. So
Yeah, and
anyway, they're the
Schoenberg
ones to
was
keep an
a
eye
little
on.
draft smoky last year. So the only rookie really of note to talk about, well, I know Tyler Sonsi could be something. I know a couple of people have talked about because of his VFL form last year and links with Hawthorn there, but yeah, I just don't see him getting the game time. If it was Richmond, somebody else maybe, but Josh Gibkas, the guy that it was down to him and Hobbs, and we really needed an inside midfielder, but because Gibkas was there and he was rated as a top 5 pick, and just kept sliding because those teams didn't need an intercept marker, key defender. So that's always the worry, but he hasn't put a foot wrong since joining the club. I don't really like paying $171,000 for defenders coming in, but there's a lot of talk about he could be lining up round 1 and why they might be pushing Bolton forward, which will be interesting. If they're willing to move Bolton forward to get Gibkas in, I think that shows a lot about the kid's character coming in to a new club.
I feel you now. I feel like they call him Stanley.
Stanley.
No?
No.
Stanley Gibkas? Come
No,
on. You can't
I
be
actually got nothing on this one,
you
mate.
can't be masking your humour there, can you? Surely.
Yeah, no, mate, I've got actually nothing for that one.
Oh, I'm going to start calling you Jim because you should be caring more.
But apart from that, mate, yeah.
Swiz, you heard
no,
me.
I've got
The
nothing. Sorry,
mask.
mate.
I'll call you Jim because you're not caring. Jim Carey, The
Yeah,
Mask,
I know, mate.
Stanley
I know. I was thinking that, but
Gibkas.
yeah. Now I'm with you.
Gibkas.
Yeah, now I'm with you, mate. Now I'm with you.
Gibkas.
Yeah,
Stanley
Ipkiss. Yeah.
Gibkas.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah,
Where's
bloody
Chris when
hell,
you need him? Chris?
Yeah, you and your fucking dad jokes and shit
Chris.
like that.
No, it's a
Chris,
movie
where are you,
joke.
Chris?
It's a
Yeah.
movie joke.
Looking through the percentages, mate. 8% have Morris Riolli in there. So those picking him, even if he was to get a game, he's a small forward. He's not getting points, and it's a bit like Mosquito coming in for the Bombers when he was playing.
Yep.
That's what he's going to do. So just
or
take him
Junior,
on your side.
or Motlop Junior. I wonder if Motlop Junior likes meat pies at Bali as well in the off season. Remember how Motlop came back like 5 to 10 kilos overweight?
Well, actually, my mate said that we were talking about the Hawks podcast the other day, and I was talking about Jai Sarong, and my mate was doing laps, and I was like, "Well, who's that guy who's come back with looking a bit weighty?" And then he looked up and he was like, "Oh, that's just the new kid." So he's like, "If you're looking at Jai Sarong, maybe just cross him off the list at the moment because the training eye test from my mate didn't, wasn't a tick for him." So just a little interesting one there. But outside of that, mate, I think that's it from my Tigers, and that there are a few draft relevant guys just because of the value that you can pick up. So yeah, a bit more relevant than previous years, and just because we had that drop down the ladder.
Yeah, they're kind of like, even I think we're just saying like kind of the Richmond of old are sort of like Port Adelaide now, where Port Adelaide outside of like 2 players and maybe a couple of rookies, like they're a team of. They do well as a team, but no one really sets the water like alight as far as Supercoach generally, outside of a couple of players. So it's going to be interesting to watch, and we'll definitely keep an eye out on that. And that's it from us, everyone. We will catch up with you. We'll release some more podcasts over the next day or 2. We'll try and get on and finish this series tomorrow night. Swiz, thank you very much for joining me this evening, and we'll catch you next time.
Mate, anytime I'll talk Tigers with you. So, no, a lot of fun tonight, mate. So, yeah, I'll catch you tomorrow.
There's a big, big sound on the... Oh, that's not it, is it?
That's not it.
All right. Catch you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.